everybody. Another one of the speakers at the Fresh Milk Food Politic Conference is well-known and respected, most of the time, lawyer Jason Gratl. Jason, you have a civil liberties background, and you see this issue very much as a civil liberty, and one where people have the right to decide what kind of food they're going to have, and yet we have Mother Government Canada saying, no, you can't have this. What are your thoughts?
I don't know if I'd say, I think there's a civil liberties dimension in terms of a right that ought to be recognized by the courts, namely a right to choose what goes into your own body, and a right to make nutritional choices for yourself. And I also think that there's a positive right for the collective to make sure that every person has an appropriate amount of nutrition, has access to nutritious food.
So you see this as a number of issues that are on the plate here on what we need to talk about here in Canada.
Absolutely, and in part, the government has gone too far in regulating, but in part it's gone not far enough. And to my mind, what we've got is a system of tightly controlled oligopolies that are run by government institutions, boards, commissions, committees.
Well, run by and or enabled in some cases. There's certain privileges to certain corporations to be our food distributors.
Well, I don't know about that, but to my mind, the quota system that we have that deals specifically with food is an interesting system because it's a system that's producer and distributor controlled. And consumers don't have a seat at the table. So the system of marketing boards it's not a third-party system, the way the CRTC is a third-party regulator. It's a participant-regulated system where the foxes run the hen house, and the hens don't have a seat at the table.
They don't get to cluck at this one. Nope.
No, and I think that's a shame. And so, but I say overall, we need not divest ourselves of that structure. We don't even need a third-party regulator.
Okay, but Jason, when you look at the regulation, and the regulation here in BC, which I understand they've brought in more recent than not, that they list unpasteurized milk as a health hazard. Right? It's hazardous to your health.
That's under the Public Health Act, which to my mind, when I look at the Public Health Act, that's an emergency measures act designed to control sort of outbreaks, pandemics, SARS kinds of problems.
But the number one food is unpasteurized milk. I mean, this lethal white liquid that, unless heated to a certain point, is one of the most recognized health hazards. Don't you find that absurd? I mean, you've probably been educated because you have a number of quite infamous clients now, you might say.
Infamous?
Famous?
That's like infamous, like more than famous, right?
And you have to admit they're among the most creative lots on how they have been dealing with the legal issues, and you must kind of laugh when you get looked at what you have to handle. But when you look at that, and having now educated yourself in the science and the medical and the medicinal issues related to milk, isn't it absurd? And you use that word a lot in your speech. Isn't it absurd that unpasteurized milk is listed as one of a health hazard in BC?
Well, the Public Health Act allows for regulations to be passed about things that are considered to be dangerous to public health. I'll just give you an example. Septic tanks have to be at least 100 feet away from the nearest water supply or navigable water. So you can't build your septic tank next to a stream, for example, and that's deemed under the Act by way of regulations to be a public health hazard. It was grandfathered in when it first came, but for all new septic systems that are built, they have to meet this regulation. Seems sensible to me. I like the rule. I'm glad it's in place. To put raw or unpasteurized milk in that same category seems to me a little rich. It's hard for me to swallow that story that raw milk rises to that level of sort of known danger associated with putting excrement in your water supply. I just don't see it as being sufficiently dangerous to regulate it in that way.
Statistics would support your lack of ability to relate those two to each other.
Well, the stats say that pasteurized milk is, it can be, if properly regulated, more safe than unpasteurized milk. And I can see that there might be, I mean, that's from the government perspective. They say, well, we've got a choice between pasteurized and unpasteurized milk. Why not just take the safer route? Why not take the more careful route? And if I'm a bureaucrat and I'm trying to deal with these problems from an epidemiological point of view, from a public health point of view, I'd say, well, the stats are a little better with this. Let's go with this. But the absolute danger posed by either pasteurized milk or unpasteurized milk is minuscule. It is really one of the very quite safe substances.
Yes.
And so, I mean, it's much less dangerous than meat, for example, much less dangerous than spinach, much less dangerous. I mean, so you kind of get into a level of risk analysis that is sliced very, very thinly.
Well, why are we even having this debate? Now, I should say, in fairness, there's actually 2 participants here at this conference, and I think it was a delight for the participant organizers to see members of the Dairy Council of BC here, to be educated, to be listening, to be applauding. I think you even got a few rounds of applause there. Are we making progress on this front? What needs to be done? If they say, Jason Gratl, sit down and write for us what BC needs to do to make sense out of all this nonsense.
Well, there are existing statutory provisions that would allow a pilot project to take place.
And that would be the safe direction to go in, right? For public confidence, due diligence, and all those other areas, if we were to...
Perfectly consistent with a harm reduction strategy currently endorsed for other dangerous substances like heroin.
Oh, you really are trying to make trouble, aren't you?
Well, you can have like an insight that is closely scientifically monitored, assessed for its dangers, public health benefits, and risks can be appropriately assessed. And the statutory framework exists to put that in place. Why would the government spend its money on bringing farmers, civil disobedient or not, like Michael Schmidt and Alice Jongerton to court when they could rather sensibly arrest the gray market, figure out what the problems are, assess the risks, all at very little cost to the public purse.
That's too practical.
Sometimes, though, bureaucracies, governments, decision makers start on a path that they find it very difficult to get off, and what it requires is a little hop from one path to another, like a little sidestep. And maybe the new government will be that opportunity to make that sidestep, so we can...
It sounds like politically there's will if the NDP gets into power, or as most British Columbians at this point would say, when they get in power. Yeah. But we're making progress. Is that at the end of the day we are making progress?
Well, I'll tell you from my perspective, the unpasteurized milk movement, the food movement generally in British Columbia, is nascent. It's still developing. People are finding their conceptual footings, trying to figure out how to work into the existing legal and economic framework, and there's development, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, a work in progress, but moving in the right direction. Jason Gratl, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for all your good words and wisdom and insight that you provided here at the conference today. I know your speech was enjoyed by lots.
Thank you, and I'll look forward to that check for $100,000 as soon as you can put that in the mail.
And for those of you who are wondering what all that is about, you have to stay tuned for a future Roadkill Radio episode where Jason has promised to come on the show, and we will talk about that.
Actually, no promises being made except for the promise to pay $100,000.
The Fresh Milk Food Politics Conference was an enormous success. Not only did it bring people from all over the country together, but it opened the door of dialogue for all stakeholders. The Fresh Milk Food Politics Conference facilitated a stellar panel of speakers that were effective in the crucial role of providing information and education to attendees. Most importantly, the Fresh Milk Food Politics Conference equipped concerned and informed citizens with the essential tools necessary to engage in the debate and bring about the needed changes that are vital to the health of all Canadians. None of this would have been possible without the generous support of our sponsors. Therefore, it is with sincere appreciation and gratitude that we acknowledge those who made this important event possible.